Good morning again. Welcome to the Carmel New Church. So today I want to start a new summer series, and the title for that is, What Should I Fear? What should I fear? So each week we're going to be looking a little bit more of that question of what should we fear. To help us along the way, we're going to be using the Lord's Prayer and the Ten Commandments. And why those two things? Well, if you think about the Lord's Prayer is part of every ritual that we do as a church. We say the Lord's Prayer often. Perhaps you say it at home yourself or recite it in your own prayer life. And the Ten Commandments are a summary of everything that the Lord teaches in His Word. Everything summarized in 10 short statements. And so we're going to be using these two really important teachings to help answer that question of what should I fear? Now, all things of the church, whether it's ritual or memory verses that we have or prayers that we say, in themselves are empty. They are just actions, or they are just words, or they're just part of our memory. But yet they're useful. We infill those things as we grow older, but while we are young, those things are really important as a foundation. They are a placeholder, as it were, that is a preparation for what comes next. So the rituals are important for kids. Right? Routine, for example, in a family, it's important for the kids. We know that ritual is important. Being able to recite the Ten Commandments or being able to recite the Lord's Prayer, those are placeholders. They might just be words for us when we start off with, but they're a placeholder. They are a foundation. They are a door that we learn to move beyond as we mature in our spiritual life, as we move into adulthood and start seeing and experiencing life for our own. So the words aren't just words anymore. The rituals aren't rituals anymore. There's something much deeper within all of those things. And so we're going to take the Ten Commandments and the Lord's Prayer that could be just placeholders in our lives, just doorways that are waiting to be opened, and we're going to try and use them to open up the doorway, as it were, to start building a house on that foundation that the Lord gives us through His Word. Trying to answer that question of what should I fear? So the hope for this series is that through using the Ten Commandments and the Lord's Prayer and looking deeper into them, that hopefully we're able to see through the doorway that each of these give to us. Look through the doorway to the spiritual walk, the spiritual journey that the Lord is calling us to. And then it's up to each one of us as individuals to use what we have learned to walk with the Lord through the door and into our spiritual journey. It always sounds so straightforward. Well, just walk through the door. Just walk with the Lord. Just continue your spiritual journey. It sounds so straightforward. But things are never straightforward. That doorway to spiritual life is blocked. There's something or someone that always stands in the way that stops us walking that walk, stops us journeying with the Lord. And that something that stands in that way, that someone who is between us and the door, is ourselves. We stand in our own way when it comes to our spiritual journey. We stand between ourselves and the Lord. What do I mean by this? Think about standing in the way. What is it that stands in the way? We taught in the teachings for the new church that each of us has a proprium. Now that is a Latin word that means sense of self. Each of us is born, is gifted by the Lord with a sense of self, that this life is my life, that I rule my life, that I can choose for myself. That is a gift that the Lord gives to each one of us. And the purpose for that gift, the heavenly purpose, is that we freely choose to follow the Lord. But through our lives and through our tendency towards evil things, we use that proprium for selfish purposes. And we use that sense of self to think that we do really rule our own life. And so our proprium ends up being that barrier that stands between us and our journey with the Lord. Now, if we think about passing through the doorway, that passing through the doorway is an image of a change in our state. To move in spiritual terms is to change our state. And a change of state happens when we change how we feel about something, or we change how we think about something, or our perspective on something changes. And so the walk with the Lord, to journey with Him, is all about change. Change in our heart and change in our mind. But the problem arises between our proprium and the Lord's call for us to change. Our proprium doesn't like change. We have probably all experienced this in our lives. In many ways, we are resistant to change. We like things in our own box. We like things our own way. And as soon as something challenges that, we see it as a threat. And so our proprium sees any change as a threat to itself, a threat to its existence. Right? Our proprium doesn't want to lose control. Our proprium lacks certainty, and change brings with it uncertainty. It doesn't like things outside of the box. Right? Our proprium likes things in order, within our control, within our view, and anything outside of that, it sees it as a threat. And we can see this in many aspects of our life. Right? Any change in our life is difficult. Some changes are forced on us. When a loved one dies, right? A huge change, and it takes us a long time to work through that grief, work through that pain, and to move forward. Right? A big change, but some are smaller changes. As we live in a community and there's development around us, we might feel fearful of the urban development that's happening around us. Right? Change is happening to us. There are cultural changes within the world. As the world mixes more and more, so we might feel, well, my culture is under threat. There's changes coming. And what rises up within us as we are faced by these changes is a fear. When we feel threatened, fear rises up within us. And how does fear respond? There's fight, flight, or freeze. As soon as we are faced with fear, we can either stand up and fight and try and fight against what is attacking us, or we can try and flee and run away, or we don't know what to do and we freeze. The same thing applies to the change when it comes to our spiritual state, when it comes to change that is needed on our spiritual journey. We can also have that same response of fear of losing control, or fear of the unknown. And so we can either fight the change within ourselves. We are defensive about our position, and we are sort of stuck in our little box. We could flee. We flee from arguments. We don't want to hear other people's opinions. We want to get away. We want to separate ourselves from those people because they're just too different, and I don't want to listen. I feel threatened by their different ideas. Or we can freeze. We can not know what to do, and if we're not doing anything, then we're not dealing with the change. We're not overcoming the change. We're not working through the change. We're just victims to the change, and it pushes us wherever it goes. So we have the response to any change is one of fear. A fear that comes out of our proprium, a fear that likes things in boxes, and anything outside of that causes fear within our lives. But the problem with fear is that it blinds us. It blinds us to the opportunity that is presented to us through the change. It's interesting that central to the Christian faith is change, rebirth, regeneration. That is all about change. Right? In the new church, that idea of change is strengthened in the teachings for the new church, that our life is about change. To walk with the Lord is to change. And so we have this proprium in us that resists change, and we have the Lord's call to change. And so we have this battle that exists within each one of us between our proprium and between the path that the Lord is calling us to. And there is a tension, there is a battle that we need to overcome. So how do we work on this fear? How do we move away from fear and towards what is trusting in the Lord? That's where the Lord's Prayer and the Ten Commandments are going to help us. So I want to go to the Lord's Prayer from Matthew 6, just the first little line from verse 9. Our Father, who art in the heavens. Our Father, who art in the heavens. In that short little statement, the Lord gives us where we need to focus, where our focus should be. Our focus should be on the Lord. And then when we read the Ten Commandments always carry within them a warning, what we should look out for. So let's read the Ten Commandments from Exodus 20. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. So we can read the Ten Commandments and we can look at it very naturalistic or materialistic and say, well, we shouldn't have anything visible around us that we worship. We shouldn't have a carved image in our hand that we worship. But it goes much deeper than that. That image that we worship is our proprium. That thing that stands in the way between us and the journey with the Lord is our proprium. The place where we are focusing our attention most of the time is around the things of our proprium. And so as we look inwards into the Ten Commandments, we see that they're not just about material things. They're about us and our spiritual walk with the Lord. And so it is our proprium that stands in the way, and we need to change our focus, put our focus on the Lord, our Father, who is in the heavens. And so in shifting our focus, we're also going to shift the fear. The fear of change, the fear of things being different, and shift it to a fear of the Lord. And we're not talking here about the unhealthy fear of punishment as the fear that belongs to the proprium. We're trying to move beyond that to something different. I want to read to you from the book Secrets of Heaven, number 2826 by Emanuel Swedenborg. Present within all worship. When we hear about worship, we hear love. Everything that comes from love and charity towards others, that is true worship. So present within worship, there is fear. But this fear takes on a different form and nature, for it is holy fear. And so we have the fear of our proprium, but we have a completely different fear, a fear of the Lord, or a holy fear that is possible. And that's the fear that the Lord wants us to have, a holy fear. So let's read further about this holy fear. Read from Secrets of Heaven 37:18. The fear of love is a fear of injuring the Lord in any way, or of injuring the neighbor in any way, thus of injuring what is good and true in any way, and consequently of injuring the sacred things of love and faith and the consequent worship. What has been spoken of there? When we think about things good and true, we're thinking about spiritual life. The spiritual journey is about opening ourselves up to what is good and true from the Lord. And so holy fear is a fear of doing harm to that ability to open up to the Lord and to receive what is true and what is loving from Him. And so to be in holy fear really is to fear about the spiritual journey of others, but also one's own spiritual journey. To fear what is good and true is to fear what is good and true within ourselves, not to do harm to those things within ourselves too. So to have holy fear is to fear doing harm to another's spiritual journey, as well as fear of doing harm to our own spiritual journey. In contrast, our proprium fears doing harm to itself alone. I fear harm that will come to me and harm of what is mine, my friends, my family, me. Whereas holy fear is on a whole different nature, a whole different level. Rather than being earthly in its focus, holy fear is spiritual in its focus, on good and true in our neighbor as well as ourselves. So the Lord wants us to move into the space of holy fear, where we are concerned about our spiritual journey and the spiritual journey of others around us. But that fear from our proprium stands in the way. So how do we get past that fear? How do we get past our proprium? Do we have to sort of squeeze our way past our proprium? Do we need to push it down and walk over it? What does it mean to get to the doorway and to get past our proprium? It sounds like we need to go past it or around it or avoid it in some way. But the only way through the doorway is to actually see our proprium, to look straight at our proprium. That's the only way to journey forward into our spiritual journey, is to look and see our proprium for what it is. To see our proprium is to see that the fear that is rising up comes from a fear of us losing something, a fear that rises up from natural concerns, from selfish concerns. And when we can see that and see that our proprium is selfish, that these fears are of a selfish nature, as soon as we see it, our proprium loses its power. Its power to rule us vanishes. Its godlike status in our lives disappears. It crumbles. And the interesting thing is that in seeing our proprium and seeing it for what it is to move through the doorway into our spiritual journey, move beyond where we are into the presence of the Lord, is to see our proprium for what it is. If we can't see our proprium, it stands as a barrier. If we can't see our proprium, we can't move beyond it. It is putting up a false image in front of us, a false reality of what life is about. And so to see our proprium for what it is, to see the selfish things that arise and the fears that arise from it, is then to move forward into our spiritual journey. And then, as we move forward into our spiritual journey, we come to see the reality of life, the true reality of life, that there is so much more to life, that there is so much more opportunity before us, that there is opportunity within the change that we see. We come to see also the reality of just how often our proprium gets in the way. We see just how often our proprium wiggles its way and weasels its way into everything that we do, bringing up those feelings of fear that blind us to opportunities, that either we fight or we flee or we freeze, and in that way our proprium wins. It is our God, it is our ruler. And so we need to walk through that proprium, see it for what it is, and move into the reality of spiritual life. Putting the Lord first, our Father, who is in the heavens, trusting in Him, putting our trust in Him, having holy fear towards Him. And along with that, the 10 Commandments, where it says, "You shall have no other God." A reminder to us that we need to do that self-examination. Right? Where is the God that's ruling in my life at the moment? Where is my proprium getting in the way at the moment? Right? Have no other gods before me. And when we're able to journey through the doorway, when we're able to dispel our proprium, then the rituals are not just rituals. Words are not just words. A prayer is not just a prayer. A memory verse is not just a memory verse. The Lord's Prayer, for example, becomes something more. When we understand that it's trying to get us to look more towards the Lord and away from ourselves, every time we pray it, we can bring that idea to it. Every time we say the Lord's Prayer and we say, "You shall have no other gods before me," in the 10 Commandments, we can think of ourselves. Where am I in this? And so that self-examination is very much a part of that process, a part of the change. Looking to the Lord and examining ourselves. The first two important lines, one of the Lord's Prayer and one of the 10 Commandments. And that shifts our focus away from the fear of our proprium and helps us shift it towards the Lord, towards holy fear, paying attention to what is more important, the things of our spiritual life, the things of other people's spiritual life. And then we can ask ourselves that question, what should I fear? These are the things that my proprium fears. But what are the things that I should fear? With holy fear, with fear of love. Those things of holy fear is the fear of our spiritual journey. Am I getting in the way of another person's spiritual journey? What is in the way of my own spiritual journey? That's what we should fear. Am I doing harm to others? Am I doing harm to myself with regards to our spiritual life? That's what we should fear. Amen.